calls for the Desert Storm to end. And for Kuwait's military, the celebration of freedom begins. Desert, and this time a deadline of peace. President Bush says a unilateral ceasefire will begin in 2 hours. That will be 100 hours after ground fighting began in Kuwait and Iraq. But in a speech tonight, Mr. Bush gave Iraq's army a warning.
This suspension of offensive combat operations is contingent upon Iraq's not firing upon any coalition forces and not launching Scud missiles against any other country. If Iraq violates these terms, coalition forces will be free to resume military operations.
The president again insisted Iraq accept all 12 United Nations resolutions against it. Diplomatic sources tell CNN Iraq's UN ambassador may have a response before the scheduled ceasefire time, and that could mean a meeting of the Security Council. Guard divisions still fighting in and around Basra, Iraq. A senior American defense official tells CNN that fighting is winding down now. He reports little ground and air attacks, and he says one major tank battle with Iraq's highly touted Republican Guard in the Euphrates River Valley appears to be over, with the Iraqis losing about 200 tanks. Overnight fighting with the southernmost Guard unit ended with Allied forces capturing 10,000 more POWs. The Pentagon says more than 1,200 pieces of Iraqi armored equipment were destroyed in that battle. Iraq's last major battle in Kuwait occurred at the airport just outside of Kuwait City. Baghdad's 3rd Armored Division was defeated at a cost of more than 100 Iraqi tanks. American Marines, Army units, and other Allied forces were involved in that battle. If any Iraqi soldiers remain in Kuwait's capital, they are thought to be hidden snipers. While some civilians searched for those troops today, others celebrated in the streets. Brian Jenkins is in Kuwait City.
On their first full day of freedom, the people of Kuwait City came out of hiding to cheer the conquering heroes who had routed the Iraqi occupiers and sent them packing.
I want to make thanks to Mr. Bush, and I want to say to Mr. Bush, we are thank you very much because you helped the people in Kuwait.
It's beautiful to see them coming in. It's a beautiful feeling to feel free.
This is Saddam Hussein. This is Saddam Hussein.
Women gave out an Arabic cry of happiness, children waved photos of Kuwait's emir, old men danced in jubilation, and young men celebrated the restoration of peace in their city by firing off their weapons. Such an unbridled outpouring of joy isn't surprising given the extreme repression people here have suffered. Many Kuwaitis say they've endured 7 months of sheer terror, a constant threat of torture and death that kept them virtual prisoners in their own homes. Almost everyone here has some tale of horror to tell.
Take his nail, the way he did to the people, cut in pieces. Rape his family. He started raping the women, the children, 4 years, 5 years old. The soldiers that are there, women, I cannot talk. He's an animal.
They killed a lot of people, a lot of my friends, a lot of, you know, I heard a lot of stories. They took my brother for about over 2 months, you know, and he suffered a lot, and he told me, you know, what's been happening to him, you know.
What did happen to him?
Well, they tortured him, you know.
But the nightmare of occupation seemed all but erased from memory as the city's residents rushed to greet their saviors and perched their children on armored vehicles for snapshots with the men in uniform.
They're pretty grateful people. Flowers and candy and hugs and handshakes and genuine appreciation. It feels good.
Over the U.S. Embassy compound, the stars and stripes still blew in the breeze off Kuwait Bay. Marines said both the flag and the buildings appeared to have been left untouched since Ambassador Nathaniel Howell and the last of his staff pulled out in December. On the streets, many Kuwaitis waved the red, white, and blue and shouted their thanks to George Bush, his countrymen, and his allies. But they seemed happiest about being able, at long last, to wave their own country's flag without fear of being shot. Brian Jenkins, CNN.
Tomorrow, Several dozen staff members and a new ambassador will be back in the compound. Ambassador Skip Ghanim will go to Kuwait, replacing former Ambassador Nathaniel Howell, who held out for several weeks after Iraq first took over the city. Today, the commander of Operation Desert Storm presented the strategy of the U.S.-led coalition. General Norman Schwarzkopf said his troops fooled the Iraqis by massing military might along the Kuwait-Saudi border, and then hinting at an amphibious assault. Personnel from America, France, and Saudi Arabia swept around the western border. Schwarzkopf says at one point those forces could have made a major land grab.
Ladies and gentlemen, when we were here, we were 150 miles away from Baghdad, and there was nobody between us and Baghdad. If it had been our intention to take Iraq, if it had been our intention to destroy the country, if it had been our intention to overrun the country, we could have done it unopposed for all intents and purposes from this position at that time. But that was not our intention. We had never said it was our intention. Our intention was purely to eject the Iraqis out of Kuwait and destroy the military power that had come in here.
Schwarzkopf says the personnel challenging Iraq acted brilliantly, but he has a slightly different opinion of Iraq's president.
What are your impressions of Saddam Hussein as a military strategist?
He is neither a strategist, nor is he schooled in the operational art, nor is he a tactician, nor is he a general, nor is he as a soldier. Other than that, he's a great military man. I want you to know that.
General Schwarzkopf also presented new statistics on what he calls the cost of peace. They show 79 Americans have died in action during Operation Desert Storm. French officials say 7 Marines under French command died clearing mines in Iraq. 28 other military personnel died on Monday when a Scud missile struck a barracks in Saudi Arabia. 2 of them were women from Pennsylvania Reserve units, apparently the first American women to die in the conflict. French officials say 2 of their special forces personnel have been killed by Iraqi mines. And the British report 13 members of their armed forces have died. 9 were victims of an American attack plane, which mistakenly fired yesterday on 2 scout cars.
The cruel fact of war is that no matter how many procedures you put in place, this sort of incident does happen. There has never been a war where it has not happened. So the procedures we have used, I am sure, have kept the sort of incident right to the barest minimum, but we simply cannot rule it out altogether.
The United States now puts the number of Iraqi war prisoners at more than 50,000. One man said thank you as he surrendered to an American Army division. Others gave themselves up to Western journalists. Some POWs are helping coalition forces find minefields. Iraq holds at least 13 Allied military personnel. The air war continued against Iraq today. Residents of Baghdad reported 6 Allied air attacks in a 2-hour period. The coalition has gone after strategic targets in the Iraqi capital during much of the 42-day war. This power plant was hit recently, shutting down its operations. President Bush's announcement of a ceasefire is cause for joy around the world, but perhaps nowhere more so than in towns surrounding Allied military bases. Mike Capps reports from Fort Hood, Texas, where celebrations had begun even before tonight's announcement.
Tanks and Bradley fighting vehicles from 2nd Armor's Tiger Brigade teamed with Marines. They destroyed more than 100 Iraqi tanks during the Allied drive to Kuwait City. 1st Cavalry's tanks and mechanized infantry are taking on the Republican Guard in southern Iraq. And Fort Hood-based Apache helicopters destroyed dozens of Iraqi bunkers and Soviet-built tanks, paving the way for the Allied march. Postman Kerry Teichmann's routine for the past 9 years, raising the flag at Copper's Cove's post office near Fort Hood. Teichmann served in both the 1st Cavalry and 2nd Armored. Those soldiers dominate his thoughts.
I think they've done excellent. It seems like the war's been planned out good. From all reports I've heard, they're doing a real good job.
Bob Minnick's son operates Bradley fighting vehicles. Allied war success makes him happy. Still, he worries.
He's up in southern Iraq right now, and they're taking on the Republican Guard, so emotions are still high.
Lieutenant Dale Ringler supervises a Bradley vehicle platoon in Tiger Brigade. Wife Michelle is 6 months pregnant. Reports of Tiger Brigade's success excited her.
there's always that inside my stomach thinking it could be him, a casualty or something like that. I mean, war's not great any way around, so.
Rose Patton's husband is a Tiger Brigade sergeant. Good war news makes her happy, but she questions her husband's military future.
He loves the military life, but I think we have a lot of discussion because the separation and everything.
Tiger Brigade is a great bunch of people.
Killeen's mayor once commanded tanks. Now he praises Allied performance.
And what we have to offer warfare is beyond anybody's expectation. And I think Saddam Hussein was the most surprised of all of us.
I think them boys are doing a great job.
James Screwdriver Arnold won bronze and silver stars for World War II gallantry. He's proud of those he calls his soldiers.
And they had some excellent training. They got some good leaders. And those soldiers followed their orders, and that's the way the war went.
He wrote me a letter.
Despite Allied success, spouses and friends constantly remind themselves the war is not over. And they won't rest easily until they hear that Iraq has surrendered unconditionally. Mike Capps, CNN, Killeen, Texas.